She worked harder than everyone in the room, believing effort would earn her a place. But when the Christmas party invitations arrived, her name was missing, the only one left out. They expected silence. What she did instead changed the entire firm. The law firm rose above Auckland's financial district like a promised car from glass and steel. From the outside, it looked flawless. Reflective walls, clean lines, and an entrance that whispered authority without raising its voice. People passed through its revolving doors every day believing they were stepping into a place where merit mattered, where intelligence was rewarded, where fairness wasn't just argued in courtrooms but lived in hallways. For Amara Collins, that belief had once been enough. She still remembered her first morning there. The sky had been overcast, a typical Auckland gray, and she had stood across the street for a moment longer than necessary, adjusting her blazer, steadying her breath, not because she doubted her qualifications, but because she understood the weight of entering spaces that weren't built with her in mind. She was a black woman in her early 30s, sharp-eyed, composed, and deliberately soft-spoken in environments that often mistook quiet for weakness. She had learned early in life that excellence alone wasn't always enough. Sometimes you had to make people comfortable enough to notice it. Her mother had taught her that. Her mother, who cleaned offices at night, while Amara studied during the day, who believed fiercely in education, not because it guaranteed success, but because it armed you with options, who always said, some doors open slowly. Don't push. Walk through when they finally do, and don't apologize for taking up space. Amara carried that sentence with her like a private oath. Inside the firm, her early days were filled with careful observation. She learned the rhythms quickly, who spoke first in meetings, who interrupted without consequence, who got credit even when they arrived last. She noticed how some people were naturally included in conversations that happened outside meeting rooms, over coffee, at after-work drinks, during casual hallway pauses. She noticed how others weren't. At first, she told herself she was imagining it, that it was just part of being new. But years passed, and patterns don't lie. Amara worked harder than most, not out of competition, but caution. She double-checked everything. She prepared twice as much for meetings where she knew she'd be questioned more closely. She made herself useful in ways that were impossible to ignore, yet somehow still easy to overlook. She didn't complain, not once, because she understood the unspoken rules of places like this. Don't be emotional. Don't be difficult. Don't make people uncomfortable by naming things they benefit from not seeing. By her 4th year at the firm, she had built a reputation for reliability. When deadlines were tight, her name was mentioned. When something went wrong, she was trusted to fix it quietly. When junior associates struggled, they came to her, not because she was their manager, but because she listened. Still, something was missing. Belonging, not the professional kind, the deeper one, the kind that shows up in who is invited when work ends. Every December, the firm hosted its annual Christmas party, and every year, it carried weight far beyond decorations and champagne. It was the night when people were seen together, when alliances became visible, when laughter and photographs quietly told a story about who was inside the circle and who was standing just outside it. In her first year, Amara hadn't been invited. She accepted it easily. 2nd year, same. 3rd year, she noticed the list growing, expanding to include people at her level. She told herself, next year. This year felt different. She had taken on more responsibility. She had stayed late more nights than she could count. She had received praise, subtle, measured, never public, but enough to make her believe she was moving forward. So when December arrived, she allowed herself something she usually didn't. Hope. The office transformed as it always did. A towering Christmas tree filled the lobby, its lights reflecting softly off marble floors. Reeds appeared on glass walls. The cafe downstairs started serving spiced drinks. Laughter became more frequent, looser. Amara joined in carefully. She smiled. She contributed. She didn't hover. She knew better than that. But she noticed a shift in tone when people talked about the party. They spoke about it openly now, the venue, the dress code, who might attend. She noticed how invitations, once whispered about, were now assumed. Still, no one asked her if she was going. The invitation emails were scheduled for a Tuesday morning. By 10 o'clock, the floor buzzed. Phones vibrated. Screens lit up. Chairs rolled back as people gathered in small groups, laughing, comparing details. Amara refreshed her inbox. Nothing. She waited. 5 minutes. 10. She refreshed again. Still nothing. Around her, excitement grew louder. Harbor views this year. Partners really went all out. I need to find a dress by Friday. Someone glanced at her, then looked away. That was when understanding settled in her chest. Heavy and unmistakable. She wasn't forgotten. She was excluded. Intentionally. She stood slowly, smoothing her blazer, her expression calm, a lifetime of discipline holding everything in place. As she walked toward HR, she felt eyes follow her, then drop. The HR manager barely looked up. Yes. Amara explained politely. Professionally, she asked if there had been a mistake. The answer came quickly, rehearsed. Oh, the Christmas event is for senior staff only. Amara paused. I'm at the same level as several people who were invited. A thin smile. They've been more visible. That word, visible, Amara nodded, thanked her, walked back to her desk. No apology, no reconsideration, just dismissal wrapped in policy language. That evening, she went home and sat by her window, city lights flickering against the dark. She replayed the conversation again and again, not searching for anger, but understanding. She thought about all the times she had made herself smaller to fit. She thought about her mother, and for the first time, she asked herself a dangerous question. What if the problem wasn't her? The question stayed with Amara long after the city lights dimmed outside her window. What if the problem wasn't her? It was a dangerous thought, not because it was wrong, but because it challenged everything she had built her survival around. For years, she had believed that if she just worked harder, spoke softer, stayed agreeable, eventually the room would open. Now, the room had spoken back, and it hadn't said her name. The next morning, Amara arrived at the firm earlier than usual. The lobby was quiet, almost reverent in the early hours. The Christmas tree lights were still on, glowing faintly, casting reflections across the marble floor. She paused for a moment, looking at it. It struck her then how perfectly the tree represented the firm. Beautiful, carefully decorated, only certain ornaments placed where they could be seen. She walked past a reception desk, greeted the security guard who always smiled at her, one of the few people who did, and took the lift upstairs. At her desk, she opened her laptop and began working as she always did, because no matter what happened, the work still had to be done. Throughout the day, she noticed the same pattern she always had, but now she saw them without excuses. In meetings, her ideas were acknowledged politely, then quietly absorbed by the room until someone else reframed them. When that happened, the response changed. Heads nodded, pens moved, credit shifted. She had once believed this was coincidence. Now she knew better. At lunch, she sat with colleagues who spoke freely about the upcoming party, who might drink too much, which partners would attend, what kind of photos would end up on LinkedIn. No one asked her what she was wearing. No one asked if she was going. She contributed just enough to avoid appearing withdrawn, then excused herself early, returning to her desk with a familiar tightness in her chest. That afternoon, a junior associate stopped by. "Can I ask you something?" he said quietly. She looked up. "Of course. How do you manage?" he asked. "Being here, I mean." Amara studied him for a moment. He was talented, thoughtful, still early enough in his career to believe effort alone would protect him. She chose her words carefully. "You learn when to speak," she said, "and when to listen. And you remind yourself why you came." He nodded, grateful, unaware that she was answering as much for herself as for him. As the week went on, the Christmas party became impossible to escape. The firm talked about nothing else. Emails circulated about transport, timing, seating arrangements. Still, nothing came to her. She wondered, briefly, if someone would realize a mistake. They didn't. On Thursday afternoon, she received a message from Talia. "Hey!" This might be awkward, But did you get the invite? Amara stared at the screen longer than necessary, then typed, "No." 3 dots appeared instantly. That's not right. Those words did something subtle but powerful. They named the thing Amara had been carrying alone. Within minutes, another message followed. You're not the only one who's noticed things. That evening, Amara went for a walk along the harbor. The air was cool, sharp, grounding. Boats rocked gently against the docks, lights reflecting off the water in broken lines. She thought about her childhood, about classrooms where she was the only one who looked like her, about teachers who praised her intelligence with surprise, about learning early how to be excellent without being threatening. She remembered her mother coming home late, exhausted, still asking about her day, still insisting she rest, eat, believe. You belong anywhere you work for, her mother had said once. But some places will test how badly you want to believe that. At the firm, Amara had passed every test they gave her, but this one felt different. This one wasn't about work. It was about worth. Friday morning arrived with a strange calm. The official party was that evening. Amara dressed her work as she always did. Understated, polished, careful. She tied her hair back, applied minimal makeup, chose a neutral blazer, the same armor she wore every day. At the office, excitement buzzed. People left early to prepare. Desks emptied faster than usual. Laughter floated through the halls. Amara stayed. She worked until her screen blurred slightly, not from fatigue, but from something heavier. At 5:30, she shut down her computer and stood, the office nearly empty now. She gathered her things slowly, deliberately. As she stepped into the lift, her phone vibrated. Another message from Talia. "Are you doing anything tonight?" Amara hesitated. Then she typed back, "Not anymore." The lift doors closed, and in that quiet moment, suspended between floors, something inside her shifted. She realized she was tired of shrinking, tired of waiting, tired of rooms that celebrated themselves while pretending not to see her. That night, instead of going home, Amara sat at her kitchen table with her laptop open, a notebook beside her. She didn't plan a protest. She planned a gathering. She thought about the people who had reached out quietly, the ones who had shared looks of understanding, private messages, careful questions. She wrote down names. Not many, but enough. She searched for venues, small, warm spaces near the water. She booked one without overthinking it. Then she wrote the message. Simple, honest, unapologetic. This Christmas, I'm hosting a small gathering for people who show up every day, even when they're overlooked. No hierarchy, no expectations, just food, music, and space. She sent it one by one, not a mass email, personal invitations. When she closed her laptop, her hands were trembling, not with fear, but with something unfamiliar. Relief. She stood by the window again, looking out at the city. For the first time since the invitation emails had gone out, she didn't feel invisible. She felt intentional. The moment the invitations were sent, doubt crept in. It didn't arrive loudly. It didn't shout. It whispered. Amara woke the next morning with a familiar tightness in her chest, the kind that usually came before important meetings or difficult conversations. She reached for her phone instinctively, half expecting regret to have rewritten her decision overnight. But the messages waiting for her did something else entirely. Thank you for this. I didn't realize how much I needed this until now. I'll be there. Each reply felt like a quiet hand on her shoulder. Still, the fear remained. She knew what she was risking, not officially, not on paper, but socially. In places like the firm, social defiance was often more dangerous than professional mistakes. People forgave errors in work. They rarely forgave disruptions to comfort. At the office that day, Amara felt eyes linger longer than usual. Word hadn't spread openly, but energy always moved faster than information. People sensed when something was happening just outside their control. In a meeting that morning, a senior associate joked lightly about alternative Christmas plans. Amara kept her gaze on her notes. Her heart beat steadily. She reminded herself that she hadn't done anything wrong. She had simply stopped asking for permission. Over the next 2 days, Planning became her anchor. After work, she visited the venue again, a modest community hall with wide windows facing the harbor. Sunlight poured in during the day, warm and forgiving. She imagined it filled with laughter, conversation, warmth. She arranged chairs herself, set up lights, tested the sound system. She chose music that didn't demand attention but invited it. Familiar songs, gentle rhythms. Food was simple, shared, intentional, nothing extravagant, everything honest. Each decision felt grounding, as if she were slowly reclaiming a part of herself she had tucked away to survive. At the firm, preparations for the official party intensified. Emails flooded inboxes, last-minute changes, seating charts revised, dress code reminders. Still, no one mentioned her absence. That silence hurt, but it also clarified something important. They had noticed, they just didn't care. Friday arrived faster than she expected. By noon, the office was buzzing. People left early to get ready. Desks emptied. Laughter echoed through hallways usually reserved for urgency. Amara stayed until 5. She finished her work carefully, deliberately. She shut down her computer, packed her bag, and stood still for a moment, looking around the nearly empty office. This place had taken years from her. Tonight, she would take something back. As she stepped into the lift, she caught a reflection in the mirrored wall. She looked calm, but her eyes told a deeper story. At the venue, the first guests arrived early. Nervous smiles, uncertain laughter, hands clutching small offerings of food or drinks. Amara greeted each one personally. No titles, no hierarchy, just names. As the room slowly filled, something shifted. People relaxed. Coats came off. Conversations flowed. Laughter grew louder, warmer. Stories were shared, not about cases or promotions, but about families, exhaustion, dreams that had been quietly postponed. Amara moved through the room, checking in on everyone, refilling glasses, listening more than she spoke. She noticed how different everyone looked outside the office. Lighter, more human. Across town, the firm's official party was in full swing. Crystal chandeliers glittered. Champagne flowed freely. Photos were taken. Smiles practiced. But beneath the surface, something was missing. Someone asked casually, "Is Amara here yet?" Another voice replied, "Probably busy." The conversation moved on, but the question lingered. Back at the community hall, music softened as people gathered near the windows, watching the harbor lights shimmer against the dark water. Amara stood slightly apart, absorbing the moment. This wasn't rebellion. It was recognition. Recognition of effort, of humanity, of worth. Then the knock came, soft, unexpected. The room quieted instinctively as Amara turned toward the door. She opened it and froze. Standing there was Richard Hale, senior partner, founding name, the kind of presence that bent rooms without speaking. For a brief second, neither of them moved. "I hope I'm not interrupting," he said quietly. Amara stepped aside. "You're welcome." He entered slowly, taking in the room, the warmth, the absence of performance, the authenticity. People watched him carefully, unsure how to react. This was not his environment. He cleared his throat. "I didn't know," he said. Amara met his eyes. "I believe you." That simple statement disarmed him. "I found out today," he continued, "about the invitations, about how decisions were being made." A pause. "And about how long this has been happening." The room was silent. No one interrupted. No one needed to. "I'm sorry," he said, not as a partner, as a person. Amara nodded slowly. "This," she said, gesturing to the room, "is what happens when people stop waiting to be included." Richard looked around again. "I think," he said carefully, "the firm needs to see this." And in that moment, power shifted, not loudly, not dramatically, but permanently. The room did not erupt after Richard Hale spoke. There was no applause, no dramatic confrontation, no raised voices. Instead, there was something far more unsettling. Stillness, the kind that follows a truth no one can easily dismiss. Richard remained standing near the entrance, his presence no longer commanding but exposed. For the first time, he wasn't the most important person in the room. He was simply another participant in a moment he did not control. Amara watched him carefully. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt responsible, not for what had happened, but for what came next. Richard moved slowly toward one of the shared tables, setting his coat down, accepting a glass of water when someone offered it. He didn't reach for champagne. He didn't posture. He listened, and that, more than anything, unsettled the room. People began to speak, hesitantly at first, not accusations, observations. A senior associate mentioned being overlooked for years despite strong performance. A junior lawyer spoke about being mistaken for support staff more times than she could count. Another admitted they had benefited from proximity rather than merit and hadn't questioned it. Amara didn't lead the conversation. She held the space, and Richard listened as if the floor beneath him had shifted. Because it had. Later that night, as the gathering wound down, Richard approached Amara quietly. "I don't expect you to trust this," he said, "but I want to understand how deep this goes." Amara considered him carefully. Then she said, "Start by listening tomorrow, not speaking, just listening." He nodded. "I can do that." Monday arrived with a different weight. At the firm, whispers moved faster than emails. People knew something had happened, not the details, but the impact. Energy shifted in hallways. Conversations paused when certain people approached. Eyes searched faces for clues. Amara arrived early, as she always did. But this time, she didn't shrink. She walked through the lobby with steady steps, aware of the looks following her, not curious now, but cautious. At 10 o'clock, a firm-wide email appeared. Subject, reflection and responsibility. It was brief, direct. Richard acknowledged that the Christmas party exclusion had revealed deeper cultural issues. He took responsibility for not seeing them sooner. He announced a comprehensive review of internal practices, advancement pathways, and leadership accountability. No defensiveness. No corporate distancing. The reaction was immediate. Some felt relieved. Some felt exposed. Some felt threatened. At lunch, conversations were quieter. People chose their words more carefully. In the afternoon, Amara received a meeting request. Richard Hale, 4 p.m. She didn't hesitate. His office was exactly as she remembered. Floor-to-ceiling windows, understated luxury. The city stretched out beneath them like a map of influence. "Thank you for coming," he said. "I didn't come for gratitude," Amara replied calmly. "I came for clarity." He nodded. "I want you involved," he said. "Not as a symbol, as a contributor." He explained the plan: independent reviews, leadership training, transparent promotion criteria, a commitment to listening sessions led by people who had been ignored too long. "I don't want this to be performative," he said. "I want it to last." Amara leaned forward slightly. "And if people resist?" she asked. He smiled, not confidently, but honestly. "They will, and we'll deal with it." Over the following weeks, the firm felt unfamiliar. Meetings changed tone. Credit was acknowledged more openly. Decisions were questioned. Not everyone welcomed it. Some complained quietly about distractions. Others dismissed the changes as temporary. But the conversations had started, and once started, they refused to disappear. Amara found herself approached by colleagues she barely knew. Some thanked her. Some asked for advice. Some simply wanted to say they had felt the same way. For a long time, she listened because listening had always been her strength. One evening, as the city lights flickered on outside her window, Amara received another message from Richard. "I'd like to formalize your role in this." The proposal was clear. A newly created position, one that carried authority, access, and accountability. Not an honorary title, not a side project. Real power. She read it twice. Then she closed her laptop and sat in silence. She thought about her mother, about the younger version of herself who believed rooms would eventually open. And she realized something important. They had opened because she had knocked and refused to leave. The first thing Amara learned about visibility was this: it never comes alone. With recognition came scrutiny. With authority came resistance. And with change came fear, not hers, but theirs. The announcement of her new role spread quickly, though the firm never made it ceremonial. There was no applause in meetings, no congratulatory email blasted across inboxes, just a quiet adjustment to the internal structure, a new title on the organizational chart, a new responsibility that didn't quite fit the old order. Some colleagues congratulated her sincerely. Others smiled politely and said nothing more. A few avoided her altogether. Amara noticed everything. She noticed how meetings paused when she entered now, not out of respect, but calculation. She noticed how her words were weighed differently, how questions came wrapped in concern rather than curiosity. "You're taking on a lot," someone said carefully one afternoon. "Change can be disruptive." Amara nodded. "Disruption is sometimes necessary," she replied evenly. Not everyone appreciated that answer. Behind closed doors, resistance took quieter forms. Emails went unanswered. Decisions were delayed. Invitations to informal discussions, the kind where real influence lived, somehow missed her calendar. None of it was overt, and that was the point. Amara understood the strategy immediately. They weren't going to challenge her openly. They were going to wait her out. At home, the pressure followed her. She slept less, thought more, replayed conversations long after they ended. She questioned herself more than she ever had. Am I pushing too hard? Am I becoming the problem they warn me about? On one particularly long evening, she called her mother. "I don't know if I'm built for this," Amara admitted quietly. Her mother didn't rush to reassure her. Instead, she asked, "Are you tired because it's wrong or because it's hard?" The question landed where it needed to. Amara closed her eyes. "It's hard," she said. "Then rest," her mother replied. "But don't retreat." As part of her role, Amara began hosting listening sessions, small, confidential conversations where employees could speak freely about their experiences. At first, attendance was cautious. People feared consequences. They feared being labeled. They feared nothing would change. Amara didn't promise solutions. She promised honesty. Slowly, the rooms filled. Stories emerged, not dramatic, not headline-worthy, but persistent. Being overlooked for years. Being mistaken for administrative staff. Being excluded from social spaces where careers quietly advanced. Patterns became impossible to ignore. Amara documented everything carefully, not emotionally, methodically. She knew that feelings alone wouldn't move systems. Evidence would. Still, the emotional toll was real. She carried other people's disappointments home with her. She absorbed anger that wasn't hers to hold. She learned that being trusted with truth was both an honor and a burden. One afternoon, after a particularly heavy session, Richard stopped by her office. "You okay?" he asked. Amara considered the question honestly. "I'm doing the work," she said. "That's what matters." He nodded. "I underestimated the cost," he admitted. "Not just for the firm. For you." She met his gaze. "Then help carry it," she said. He didn't argue. Not everyone welcomed the changes. A senior associate confronted her after a meeting. "This feels like we're being punished for things we didn't do," he said. Amara kept her voice calm. "This isn't about punishment," she replied. "It's about accountability." He scoffed lightly. "Feels like politics." She didn't flinch. "Everything is," she said. "The difference is who benefits." Word of the exchange traveled quickly. Some admired her composure. Others labeled her difficult. Amara knew the labels would come. She had prepared for that. What she hadn't fully prepared for was a loneliness. The higher she moved, the fewer people stood beside her, not because they didn't agree, but because standing beside her required courage. And courage is expensive. One evening, she discovered that a key recommendation she had submitted had been quietly removed from the agenda of an executive meeting. No explanation, no discussion, just omission. She stared at the screen for a long moment, then closed her laptop. This was the test. The moment where she could let it go, where silence would be easier, safer. Instead, she stood and walked straight to Richard's office. "It's missing," she said calmly. He glanced at the agenda, then back at her. "I see that." A pause. "I want it back on," she said. Not a request. A statement. Richard studied her for a long moment. Then he nodded. It'll be addressed, he said. And it was. The following week, the recommendation passed. Quietly, but definitively, Amara returned to her office and sat down slowly. Her hands were steady. Her heart was not. She realized then that courage wasn't a single moment. It was a series of choices, made again and again, often without applause. As months passed, small changes became visible. Promotion criteria were clarified. Mentorship programs expanded. Informal decision-making began moving into documented spaces. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. One afternoon, a junior associate stopped her in the hallway. "I just wanted to say thank you," she said. "I stayed because of this." Amara smiled gently. "That's enough," she said. That night, at home, she stood by her window again, the same place where she had once questioned whether the problem was her. She knew the answer now. The problem had never been her, and the solution had never been silence. Change rarely announces itself with celebration. More often, it arrives quietly, disguised as routine, hidden inside small decisions that don't look revolutionary until time gives them meaning. That was how it happened at the firm. There was no dramatic overhaul, no public reckoning that made headlines. Instead, there were adjustments, subtle at first, almost unremarkable. Meeting agendas became more structured. Credit began to be assigned deliberately. Mentorship stopped being informal and exclusive. None of it felt exciting, but it felt different. Amara noticed it in the smallest moments. In meetings where junior voices were invited to speak first. In conversations where assumptions were questioned instead of accepted. In the way people paused before dismissing ideas that didn't come from familiar faces. The firm was learning. Slowly. Unevenly. But genuinely. Still, not everyone was comfortable. For some, the old system had worked perfectly. It had rewarded proximity, similarity, silence. It had protected them from ever having to question how they benefited from it. Those people didn't resist openly. They waited. They complied just enough to appear cooperative, while hoping the momentum would fade. Amara understood this pattern well. Change always threatens those who confuse comfort with fairness. She stayed patient, not passive. Patient. She focused on building structures that didn't rely on her presence alone, policies that would outlast personalities, systems that didn't require constant vigilance to function. It was exhausting work, invisible work, the kind that rarely earns praise. At times, she wondered if anyone noticed how much of herself she was giving. One evening, long after most of the office had emptied, Amara sat alone in her office, reviewing notes from yet another listening session. She closed the folder and leaned back in her chair, staring at the ceiling. She felt tired. Not the kind of tired that sleep fixes, but the kind that comes from carrying responsibility without shared ownership. Her phone buzzed. A message from Richard. "Still here?" She smiled faintly and replied, "Always." A few minutes later, he knocked softly and stepped inside. "You don't have to do this alone," he said. Amara looked at him carefully. "I know," she replied, "but knowing and seeing it are different things." He nodded. "Tell me what you need." The question mattered. She thought for a moment. "Visibility," she said. "Not mine. The work's. People need to see this isn't temporary." Richard leaned against the desk, thoughtful. "Then we make it permanent," he said. The opportunity came sooner than expected. The firm was up for a major public sector contract, one that would put its values under scrutiny. The selection panel required clear evidence of equitable practices, transparency, and accountability. For years, the firm had talked about these things. Now it had to prove them. Amara was asked to prepare the internal review, not as a formality, as a foundation. She worked meticulously, pulling data, documenting changes, acknowledging shortcomings honestly. She refused to polish reality into something unrecognizable. When she presented the findings to leadership, the room was quiet, not defensive, reflective. "This is stronger than what we had before," one partner admitted, "because it's real." They won the contract, not because they claimed perfection, but because they demonstrated progress. The results shifted something important. Skeptics took notice. Change was no longer abstract. It had consequences. As months turned into a year, Amara's role evolved. She stopped being the change initiative. She became part of the firm's identity. New hires met her during onboarding. Junior staff sought her guidance. Even senior partners began asking questions they once avoided. She learned to navigate power without letting it harden her. She chose when to push, when to pause, when to let silence do the work. Not everything succeeded. Some initiatives stalled. Some conversations went nowhere. Some people never changed. She accepted that. Transformation, she learned, was not about winning everyone over. It was about refusing to move backward. One afternoon, she found herself standing in the lobby again, watching a group of new associates arrive. Nervous, hopeful, adjusting their posture just as she once had. She wondered how different their experience would be. Not perfect, but better. And sometimes, better is how progress begins. That evening, Amara returned home later than usual. She placed her bag down, poured herself a glass of water, and sat by the window, the same spot where so many decisions had taken shape. She thought about the night she hadn't been invited, how small it had made her feel, how powerful it had turned out to be. Her phone buzzed again, a message from Talia. Guess who just got invited to lead a case? Amara smiled. She replied with a simple, "You earned it." She looked out at the city lights, steady now, familiar. She no longer needed rooms to validate her worth. She had built one of her own, and others were finding their way into it. The 2nd December arrived more quietly than the 1st. There were no nervous glances this time, no whispered assumptions, no unspoken questions about who belonged. The firm still decorated the lobby. The same towering Christmas tree, the same warm lights reflecting against marble floors. But the energy felt different now, less performative, more grounded. Amara noticed it immediately. She had learned to notice things before they were named. The conversations in hallways were slower, more deliberate. The laughter felt less strategic. People no longer spoke about the Christmas party as if it were a prize. It was simply an event, and that, she realized, was progress. She stood near the lobby one morning, watching a group of junior associates decorate a small tree in a shared workspace. No one supervised them. No one assigned roles. They worked together naturally, teasing one another, making decisions without fear of stepping out of place. A year ago, she thought this wouldn't have happened. She walked past them toward her office, not her desk, but her office, still adjusting to the weight of that word. Inside, sunlight spilled across the floor. On the shelf by the window sat a framed photograph from the gathering she had hosted the previous year. People laughing. No hierarchy. No fear. She hadn't moved the photo since the day she placed it there. It reminded her why she stayed. When the Christmas party invitations went out this year, they weren't quiet. They weren't selective. They weren't whispered about. The email arrived in everyone's inbox at the same time. No tears. No vague language. No invisible lines. Amara didn't open it immediately. She watched as the office reacted. Smiles, laughter, genuine excitement. People spoke openly about it without checking who was listening. She opened the email last, and when she read it, she felt something unexpected. Nothing. No rush of validation. No delayed satisfaction. Just calm, because this invitation didn't mean what the last one had. It wasn't a measure of her worth. It was simply evidence that something had changed. Later that afternoon, Richard stopped by her office. "I wanted you to see this before it goes out," he said, handing her a printed program. It was the agenda for the party. Speakers, acknowledgments, a brief address planned at the start. He hesitated slightly. "I added something," he said. She scanned the page. At the bottom, a simple line. "Acknowledgement of the year that reshaped us." No names. No spotlight. She looked up at him. "You don't need to do this," she said. "I know," he replied, "but I want to." She nodded slowly. "That's the difference," she said quietly. The venue was different this time. Still elegant, but warmer. Music played softly as people arrived, dressed well, but not defensively. Conversations flowed without calculation. Amara entered without hesitation. She didn't scan the room for allies. She didn't brace herself. She simply walked in. Colleagues greeted her easily. Some hugged her. Others nodded respectfully. A few smiled with something close to gratitude, not because she had power, but because she had used it responsibly. As the evening unfolded, Richard stepped up briefly. He spoke carefully. "This year," he said, "we learned that culture isn't built in policy documents. It's built in rooms. And last year, we realized some of our rooms were closed." A pause. "We're still learning," he continued, "but we're learning together." No applause followed, just understanding. Amara stood near the back, unnoticed, exactly where she preferred to be now. Later that night, a young associate approached her hesitantly. "I just want to say," she began, "I almost left last year." Amara waited. "I stayed because I saw what you did," the associate continued, "and because I realized maybe this place could change." Amara felt the weight of those words settle gently. "You don't owe me anything," she said, "but I'm glad you stayed." The associate smiled. "So am I." As the night wound down, Amara stepped outside onto the balcony overlooking the city. The air was cool, familiar. She thought about the woman she had been a year ago, standing by her window, wondering if the problem was her. She smiled softly. She hadn't needed to become louder. She hadn't needed to become harder. She had simply needed to stop disappearing. Inside, the party continued, not perfect, not healed, but honest. And honesty, she had learned, was where real belonging began. The morning after Christmas party, the office felt unusually quiet. Not empty, just settled. The decorations were still there. The tree still glowed softly in the lobby. But the buzz that usually followed big events was missing. No exaggerated laughter. No post-party boasting. No quiet comparisons of who'd been seen with whom. Amara noticed it as soon as she walked in. She paused briefly at the entrance, her reflection faintly visible in the glass doors. For a moment, she thought about how many times she had walked through these same doors feeling smaller than she should have. Today, she felt steady, not triumphant, not elevated, just present. As she crossed the lobby, she saw a junior associate helping another straighten a crooked ornament on the tree. They laughed easily, no hesitation, no checking over shoulders to see who was watching. That small moment mattered more than any speech. She reached her office and closed the door gently behind her. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the space she had slowly made her own. Her desk was neat, purposeful, and on the shelf, exactly where it had always been, sat the framed photograph from that first gathering, the night that had changed everything. She picked it up. The photo was imperfect. Someone had blinked. The lighting wasn't ideal, but the feeling was unmistakable. People leaning toward one another, unfiltered laughter, no hierarchy in sight. She remembered the fear she had felt that night, the risk, the uncertainty, the quiet courage it had taken to simply open a door. She set the frame down carefully. That door, she realized, had never closed again. Later that morning, Richard knocked lightly and stepped inside. "Do you have a minute?" he asked. She nodded and gestured for him to sit. He didn't start immediately. Instead, he looked around the office, not assessing, not evaluating, but reflecting. "You know," he said finally, "I've been here a long time." She smiled faintly. "I've noticed." He exhaled a soft, almost amused breath. "I used to believe leadership meant knowing the answers," he continued, "or at least appearing to." He looked at her directly now. "I was wrong." Amara didn't interrupt. "The most important thing that happened this year," he said, "wasn't the policies, or the reviews, or even the contract we won." She waited. It was that people stopped pretending. That she understood. He stood to leave, then paused at the door. "I don't say this often," he added, "but the firm is better because you stayed." After he left, Amara sat in silence for a long moment, not because she needed to process the words, but because she needed to let them pass through her without defining her. She had learned that lesson too. That afternoon, her calendar chimed. A meeting request. Subject: coffee from a junior associate she barely knew. Amara smiled and accepted. They met in the cafe downstairs, the same one she had passed through countless times without being noticed. The associate arrived nervous, clutching a notebook. "I won't take much of your time," she said quickly. Amara gestured for her to relax. "You already have it." The associate hesitated, then spoke. "I just wanted to ask, how did you know when to stop waiting?" The question was simple and enormous. Amara considered it carefully. "I didn't stop waiting all at once," she said finally. "I just stopped believing that waiting was the same as belonging." The associate nodded slowly. "I think I understand." Amara smiled. "That's all you need to start." That evening, as the sun dipped low over the city, Amara returned home earlier than usual. She didn't open her laptop. She didn't replay conversations. Instead, she stood by the window, the same place where doubt had once lived, and watched the city breathe. She thought about success, how she had once imagined it as recognition, advancement, being chosen. Now it looked different. It looked like rooms that didn't close when she left, like voices that weren't afraid to speak, like people staying, not because they had to, but because they felt they belonged. Her phone buzzed. A message from Talia. "Can you believe it's been a year?" Amara smiled and replied, "I can, and I'm glad we're still here." The following week, as part of quiet reorganization, Amara was asked if she wanted a larger office. She declined. Instead, she asked for something else. A shared space. A room with a long table. Natural light. Chairs that invited people to sit without asking permission. A room where conversations could happen. When it was finished, she stood in the doorway alone, looking at the space. She imagined it filled, not with authority, but with honesty, not with hierarchy, but with listening. She placed one thing on the wall, the framed photograph, not centered, not highlighted, just present. A reminder that change doesn't always arrive loudly. Sometimes it arrives as an invitation that never existed, and the courage to create one anyway. The camera lingers on the room. Empty chairs, soft light, the photograph on the wall. Then Amara enters the frame, places her bag down, and pulls out a chair. She sits and waits, not alone, but ready. Fade to black.